We are back live here at the Kit Plus show in Media City, Greater Manchester. This is the session you've all been waiting for. We're talking about artificial intelligence, so please join us for what I think will be a really fascinating conversation. My name is Andy Miah, and I'm a professor at the University of Salford, and we have a fantastic panel of experts to talk about this subject today. Sadly, however, Emma Young could not be with us, but we do have, I think, her boss, Graham Thomas from the BBC, and I'd like to sort of open up by just inviting people to say a bit about who they are, but also what they're excited about with AI. Now, for me, there's a couple of really interesting things that have happened recently with AI that are really fascinating. You might have seen Google's Notebook LM product that launched a few months ago, and there's lots of experimentation to play with that platform. This is a platform that will take a piece of text, a PDF, whatever it is, and you upload it to the platform and it will create an AI-generated two-person podcast that you can then push out as a 7-minute podcast about that piece of text. Really interesting, really playful tool, really experimental. Just yesterday, I think it was the company Synthesia, which is this AI avatar sort of models, very hyper-realistic images of people, have created a version using Notebook LM, which is when the AI avatars discover that they are AI. And it's this kind of meta-reflection on who they are and what they're doing. It's really interesting. But what for me is fascinating about it is, whilst our session is titled AI Automation, my experience of AI thus far is that whilst there are some efficiencies in automation, a lot of it isn't automated at all. A lot of it relies a lot of human hours to actually do really good work with it. And that leads me to another example, which is the platform Suno.com, which is the AI music generator, which has been around for the last nearly year, I think it is now, but which is currently undergoing a legal battle where the music publishers are suing the platform for potentially training its AI on copyrighted material. So we find ourselves in the world of sound at a time of really extraordinary experimentation, but a huge amount that still has to be figured out. And so we have a great panel to talk about these issues, think about where we're going. And I'd like to first just invite them to say a few words about themselves, but also what they're excited about in the AI world. And we are going to expand it beyond audio, I think, as well. So, Pete, perhaps you first.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I'm Pete. I actually work upstairs here. My background's I started my life in TV broadcasts, actually, OB, work, etc., but gradually sort of went into kind of the interactive area. So a lot of my work uses games engines. So I use games engines to make immersive experiences, sometimes games, sometimes films. We've got a panel coming up on virtual production where you'll find more about sort of how some of this technology is being used kind of right here, right now. But yeah, my thing is really about kind of experience and the new kinds of experience that technologies can enable, regardless of the kind of platforms they're on and things. So yeah, our lab upstairs is called Dream Lab, and we're kind of a group of artists, researchers, technologists who are really kind of starting to think about and experiment with some of these possibilities, from everything from how it can make media more accessible, how it can cut down on work of doing boring things and stuff that goes around the kind of creative process. The thing I'm most excited about, though, is the opportunity that it's going to give to people to create content and realize content visions in different kinds of ways. And I think that's going to be a massive challenge because there is going to be a lot more content. But it's also going to create opportunities for people who can't get into these kind of industries at the moment. So I think it's that democratization potential. I think that's a lot of what people are actually scared of about it as well. But yeah, and also we're at this very early stage where we're thinking about AI as sort of replacing things, but I'm also interested in what those new things are that are going to get born, what we haven't articulated yet. So things like mass personalization, we doing lots of work around this and thinking about this within a context of education as well. Media that works for me in a way that appeals to me, in a way that kind of teaches me better, or kind of gets me to understand my own medical conditions if I'm a 5-year-old, or to learn about, it's that I think that's what's really exciting, is all the potential new mediums that are going to come out of this.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pete. So, Rob, over to you. Tell us about
That's good.
yourself and what you're excited about.
Yeah, so I'm Rob Oldfield, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Salsa Sound, and we make AI-driven tools for automating audio mixes, immersive or going out over standard linear channels. We've prioritized live sports because that's fun, and I like doing things that are fun. And so if you were to ask what Salsa Sound does, I would say we do anything that's fun in sound. So yeah, we've been going for the last 7 years and going strong. What am I excited about with AI? Well, Pete stole my thunder a tiny bit, but I think for me, I'm really excited about personalization and the opportunities that affords, whereby historically it's been very difficult to deliver kind of personalized content to lots of people, like whether it's highlights content, for example. You might be having a broadcaster delivering kind of maybe 3 different types of highlights, whereas actually wouldn't it be great if I could have a highlight package that suited my needs and kind of fulfilled the kind of criteria that I have. Maybe if I've got 8 minutes, I want an 8-minute highlight reel. If I'm on the bus and it's a 23.5-minute journey, I want a 23.5-minute highlight reel. So I'm excited of the kind of ability to deliver those at scale to personalized content that would be delivered on the fly on my device. And also production efficiencies, like we can create more content of kind of niche sports or niche entertainment shows far more easily. And so to leverage AI, machine learning to improve and kind of be a tool to content producers to improve efficiencies around that, I think is something that I'm excited about.
That's really interesting. It made me think about how much we do to personalize our own content experiences already. And I remember when Netflix allowed people to play things on 1.5 speed, it was very controversial. Directors, writers didn't like the idea of it. But what I haven't told most of my family is that whenever they send me an audio note on WhatsApp, it tends to be in 2.0 speed. And my life is far better as a result of it. So Graham, over to you. It's Graham, over to you. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Graham Thomas. I'm Head of Applied Research at Production at BBC R&D, so I'm based in the top of Dockhouse, just up there. I've been in BBC Research and Development for, dare I say it, just over 40 years. So I've seen quite a few changes and waves of things coming and going. And it's interesting to see how everything is now labelled as AI, whereas 20 years ago we were doing many similar things, but we found different words for it because you didn't get so much budget funding and excitement if you didn't call it AI in those days. So what excites me? I suppose I ought to say excited, maybe slightly frightened by all the Gen AI stuff. Some of the things like Sora, that will create a video for you just by describing it. But in terms of, I think, what will give us most practical benefit in the short term, and also that we may be actually more able to use because of the avoiding issues around copyright and so on. And I've been quite amazed as well by the ability of AI to summarize things and reformat content between text and video and audio, to the extent that if you think of the sort of metadata that we would need, in fact, for some of the sort of personalization things that have been mentioned, getting production people to enter metadata for content is really quite tricky, particularly if the added audience benefit is relatively small. They're not going to be typing in reams of text to describe in a nice, easy-to-read form a chapter in a program or the description of something unless it's absolutely required by the letter of their delivery contract. But if you can get a machine to produce a perfectly usable paraphrase of something, to take a 1-hour program, divide it into chapters, write a little summary and a title for each chapter, that suddenly opens up a whole world of being able to discover things. We have a wonderful prototype we're working on with the BBC iPlayer team, where you can simply give it the program number, or the internal PID, as it's called, program ID, for a piece of content, and it'll suddenly add chapter markings to the bottom of the program. Each chapter will have a title, it'll have a little synopsis, and that's all done just from the transcript of the program. Okay, it doesn't work on Charlie Chaplin films, but most things do have transcripts. And of course, this hits you up editorially with the challenge of, oh, that's all well and good, but is it actually accurate? Can we, as the BBC, put that out in front of people without checking it? But a lot of the examples I've seen would, 95% of the time, they're good enough for that. And suddenly to turn what was a 1 or 2 hour monolithic program into a set of little segments, so you can find that comedy sketch or the goal in the football match or that particular interview on Woman's Hour that you're interested in. You've suddenly turned that thing into a whole load of little bits of content, each of which might be of personal interest to somebody. So that to me is really exciting, because it's maybe not the creating of the new content, it's the unlocking of the existing content.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think partly because it gets me to think about what is the pipeline for innovating within organisations. I'll be curious to know whether in the BBC there is already a sort of recognition that this is not just the future but already the present, and people are just shifting their work practices to find ways to integrate, or whether there has been any anxiety about where this may take the future of that industry.
There's certainly a lot of anxiety. I could go through all the in fact you can find them on the BBC website, all the sort of editorial guidelines and constraints and limits around use of particularly generative AI. The BBC, because trust is the foundation of everything we do, I think it says somewhere on the back of my ID card, putting out something that hasn't been editorially approved, the scope for getting something terribly wrong, or even just making something that looks not totally correct, is so huge that the BBC is being very careful in the way it does this. So it's not just losing audience trust, it's a potential breach of copyright or creative rights. And as an organisation that funds a huge amount of production in the UK, looking after the rights of artists and content creators is fundamental, and there's no way we want to be sidestepping that or causing any problems. So in a way, that's limiting us slightly in how we can experiment. We're being quite careful. Even to do internal experiments, we have to fill in whole loads of forms and say we're not going to share this, and everything's going to be editorially checked, to the extent that some people will use their own private accounts on some of these AI platforms just to try things out themselves.
I mean, that is a significant problem. So we've been doing business with a multinational broadcaster recently, and because we have AI in our product, it's taken a year since we started the conversation to signing a legal document to say that we can work with them. And the reality is we're doing machine learning that we've been doing for years and that the world's been doing for years, and there's nothing risky about it, and we're not stealing anyone's data, and it's fine. And it's taken us a year just to wrangle through all of their legal requirements, and that's only happened because AI has become a dangerous buzzword. So it's slowing everything down rather than speeding everything up, which is intriguing.
I think that's a really interesting area. And come back to you, Pete, because you talked about democratization. I think if you look at the last sort of 20 years or so, there's been obviously a rise of not an expansion of the people that can make really great quality material because of digital devices, and also the platforms that allow people to edit and create themselves. But I suppose the flip side of that is, to some extent, either an expansion, if you want to be generous, of the professional community, or a de-skilling of certain aspects of the art of creativity. And I wonder, where do you see currently the position of AI within the sectors that you work in? Is it still very early stages, or do you see the beginnings of that democratization emerge already?
So, yeah, of course, we know there is quite a large percentage of people who are using it, sometimes not with institutional kind of consent or kind of business consent. Where we're seeing it used most, because of those concerns about taking work through into production, is at those kind of pre-visualization stages. So I'm a producer, I need to communicate an idea. great tool for putting a pitch deck together, for doing pitch visualization, for communicating something to an artist or to someone who you might be 3D modeling your character, kind of thing. But yeah, those concerns around getting stuff out into the wild, I think it are still there. We had a session yesterday with the advertising community, a big challenge there, kind of thing. And obviously there's a couple of big cases going through at the moment that are going to probably determine where we're going to kind of stand on this. So yeah, but yeah, I think it was on Friday, a couple of young 20-somethings released a feature film on YouTube, which was made almost entirely with AI, 87-minute film. They made it with a team of 9 people. And they reckon the production cost was something like £7,000 per minute, which is massively, significantly less than other forms of production. You might have 300 or 400 people working on a Disney program, and that's amazing. And that's incredible. And it isn't. And I think the other thing I think people need to understand is it isn't like literally you're prompting, make me a film. Job done, don't even watch it, throw it out there. Although I know some people do that with documents and things. It's still a lot of craft involved. There's a lot of process. There's a lot of tool stacking. The kind of the storytelling and the emotional things that creatives do and bring to something. They have to be put in there somehow, because the machines aren't great at that kind of stuff. They're quite good at deterministic knowledge, maths, coding, etc. But something where if you ask an AI to put tension into a script, it'll just do something like Pete was tense. That isn't how you put tension into a script. It's a lot more kind of subtle, humanistic than that kind of thing. So I think there's different levels of how people are using it, and I think there is a huge craft to it, and very much in the same way there's a craft to other way more kind of traditional processes and things. And I think an appreciation of that is good. And I think an artist with AI or someone who's had training because they're an animator and they've studied the human or animal forms and how they move, they're going to be much better off in these worlds than people who haven't been through that kind of thinking process, I think. So yeah, some really interesting things, and I think I don't know if we'll see a Christmas #1 this year, but I think it's interesting how it's enabling people to go from that vision to creating that vision in a kind of different way.
And I suppose it's also recognizing that AI doesn't exist in a vacuum. I mean, even my son's 14 years old.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he has any notion of what a Christmas #1 is.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how much has disrupted over the last 20 years through all the different transformations to audience experiences, media content creation. You were talking about personalization, Rob, and I think that the idea of that 87-minute film that's on YouTube is already a provocative proposition. But equally, I watch I teach on a wildlife program that we have here at the university, and I don't watch much wildlife documentary, but I see lots of clips of it on TikTok. So I see these 1 or 2 minute clips, and that I think for many audiences these days, it is a kind of very fragmented experience of often long form content. And I wonder whether you think that with what you're seeing, actually what the opportunity is through AI in that personalization experience is to provide more interactive elements so people can curate their experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that you just touched on is so important at the minute, because there's such a big divide between how people want, in terms of generational divide, how people want to consume content between like older generations that want to watch like the full long form, and then people who want to watch 20 seconds on TikTok and tiny little clips. And so, to Graham's point, to be able to actually automate tagging and segmentation of clips so that they can be composed on the fly and delivered in, a kind of portrait form rather than landscape, or in kind of shorter sections, all of which can be leveraged automatically with AI? Or what if looking at kind of like different demographics across the world, and you can use like voice cloning maybe to have a nature program that was specifically designed for kids, like presented with a voice that's more familiar to them, but again, generated based on their preferences rather than just kind of that one-size-fits-all delivery, which I kind of think would be amazing.
Yeah. Does the BBC think it's amazing, Graham? Is that something that they're very mindful of? I mean, I guess there's a lot of conversation about future audiences, how they're different from even today's audiences.
Yes, that personalisation is a key thing. In fact, I'm one of the projects we're doing at the moment. We're working with the universities of Surrey and Lancaster in the AI for Me Prosperity Partnership. So that's a 5-year program. It's about 3 years through so far, looking at the use of AI, particularly in terms of content analysis, assembling different sizes and shapes of programs for different people and then delivering them. The idea of almost what we called intra-content personalization rather than inter-content. When you say personalization to a lot of people, they immediately take that to be synonymous with recommendations. It's the what's going to be on that personalized For You bar on iPlayer or whatever. We would see it much more as it's how that shot's framed. Perhaps it's had less flashing lights because you've got your photosensitive epilepsy, or you've got a particular kind of neurodiverse condition that you find things disrupting if they're not the key thing you should be looking at. Can we re-edit that for people like that? Thinking of, some shops have, they'll run an evening when the lights are dimmer and they get rid of the background sound so that, certain kinds of shoppers feel more at home. You could do that with program content, but you'd have to deliver audio, video, the music tracks, the speech tracks, the effects tracks differently. You need to know which elements of a scene were narratively important, which parts were just there to add a bit of fluff. Then you'd need to know something about your audience. Are they hard of hearing? Do they want the speech louder? Are they disrupted by flashing lights? Are they a long way from a not very good screen, or are they close up to a huge screen? Are they watching this on a train with a lot of background noise and poor lighting? Are they in a beautifully lit living room? There's so many things about personalization that touch both on accessibility, but also just normal people, all the different ways you consume content and the amount of time you have to consume it. Yeah. So if you can understand your content and understand your audience and have a suitably clever composition engine that puts things together in the right way, you could get something that it's essentially the same program, but it's delivered in a very different way, and it could look very different for different audience members.
I love that. I think that's exactly right. And like going back to kind of my history as an academic at university, the thing that really got me out of bed was kind of object-based media, and being able to kind of not just do a one-size-fits-all channel-based delivery, but actually have those kind of, whether it's audio or video assets or graphics assets, as separate entities that could then be compiled on the fly for like whatever replay system you've got. We were always keen to push that and to kind of say, look, this is the future, this is how things should be happening. But the huge challenge was, how do you segment those kind of assets? How do you tag them with metadata? And when you push that to an already stretched production team, they don't want to do that. It's too much effort, to your point about metadata. So it feels like with some of these AI tools, we're at a point where delivery of these personalized and accessible experiences is actually possible now, and it doesn't have to be kind of wacky, crazy Gen AI necessarily, but it's things that can help real audiences and real people overcome real challenges that they face in terms of content accessibility. So going back, that's the thing I'm excited about.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because certainly often the conversation about AI has been about whether what the AI is training on is a fraction of the data set, and that leads to a range of biases that in fact may limit inclusivity and diversity recognition. So that's really interesting to hear, and I think that's really resonates because it goes back to, again, what the values of the industry really are and how it operates around this new technology. And I'm curious to know, Pete, how it relates to the world of immersive technologies. We see often these two things kind of coming together. Are you seeing that there's a integration of AI into sort of immersive imaginations and trying to find ways to deliver more immersive experiences through this technology? Is that breathing life into it? We hear a lot about things like the Apple Vision Pro and other things that are being developed, which seem to be kind of ebbs and flows of excitement, coupled with the realization that not everyone can afford the technology. So how do we make it available to people?
Yeah, so I think this is where I think AI sits in this sort of space of convergence as well. That shift into being able to, rather than render something and broadcast it out, to actually render it out at the user end. I think it's really, really significant. And obviously games has been doing this for a long time, so non-player characters in games, for a long time been going off into their own worlds, doing their own things based on a set of principles and things. So yeah, a lot of the innovations sort of coming out there, but it's quite interesting what happens when you start to put these things together, because you can actually use simulation to create synthetic data to solve challenges around biases. So I was chatting to someone who's working on an innovation project around sign language, for example, and obviously a lot of these models are trained on certain kinds of hands and things like that. Well, actually using real-time games engines, you can create synthetic data very quickly at scale to kind of correct some of these models, kind of thing. And I think that's another interesting thing to think about is, yeah, obviously like OpenAI and, they're going off, they've already stolen most of the internet. Is there a duty for us to kind of build other forms of these things that might be better? They might not have those constraints or issues around kind of copyright and things like that as well. So I think that's really interesting, that convergence of these two things. And obviously anyone who's used Gen AI, it still has problems with hallucinations. It makes things, up. It's getting better at the six-finger thing, but consistency is a real challenge. But you can drive those tools to then, with a real-time render, and then subtly add an AI layer, and then you have got, you're starting to kind of get those consistencies and things like that as well. So I think those two spaces will come together in a really, really, really interesting ways, I think.
Yeah. And Rob, Pete was mentioning the gaming world and the immersive world coming together. With Salsa Sound, you're bringing those spaces together. I'd love to know more about what challenge it is you're working on, that you're trying to solve with the company and bringing them together.
Yeah, so I mean, a big part of it is about that object-based media that I was speaking about a second ago, and being able to segment a scene. So if you want to be able to deliver an immersive experience, then there's no point in having one microphone in the room, because you don't have the information of all of those different sound sources. So any space that you're in, there are multiple sound sources, and then there's a kind of soundscape, like a bed and atmosphere, if you like, and capturing that in a way that can be reproduced immersively is a real challenge. And it's fine if you've got Britney Spears mics like I've got, and you've got a very close recording, and you can track me around in space, and that would be easy. But if there were distributed sources around, and I only had microphones around the kind of periphery of the room, then I would need to be able to segment those sources, find out where they are in the space, and then put them into some kind of immersive environment. And that's a challenge, because that requires tools that can do audio source separation, so actually cutting out that audio asset and positioning it in space. And so that's really the challenge that we've been working on, that's use a lot of machine learning models to understand specific patterns, recognize it, and then create a mask that can chop it out with as minimal artifacts. And then we've been working with the Media City Immersive Technologies Hub.
Innovation Hub, yeah.
That thing. And part of that is to get real-time audio into a gaming engine, which is a real challenge, and in fact is not really been possible up till recently. And
So the problem now is that currently games are stereo sound essentially, and what you're
it's-
trying to do is
the,
enrich
the,
that.
the main issue is that game engines were designed to be predominantly an offline experience. So you can position audio sources and video assets in it, and you can navigate around it in a sort of game. But if you're looking at broadcast, live broadcast, and doing the kind of the gamification of TV and broadcast, that's not really something it is possible very easily. And so you see things like Travis Scott did a concert in Fortnite a while back and made like a ridiculous number of millions of dollars by doing it, virtual concert. And the videos are really great. You can move around. You can sit in different parts of the crowd, but the audio was static and produced in a sort of sidecar. Whereas what we're doing is to stream audio live into the game engine. So and you can do this with mono, weirdly, but you can't do it with multi-channel. And so we've solved that problem now. So you can have 64 different audio assets in real time live and kind of move them around and kind of interact with that scene. So you could have a concert that was streamed live, and you could walk up to the violinist and it would get louder. And so that's been one of the challenges that we've looked at. And so some of that's around the immersive bit, but it's kind of leveraged by being able to segment a scene using audio source separation, which is based on our machine learning and AI models.
That's very interesting. So not only is that providing a richer audio experience, but it's also a personalized one as well, that you can modify it to your needs and interests.
Yeah, exactly.
Very interesting. Graham, I'm really curious to know what advice you may have for young professionals entering the media sector and trying to work out how to think about AI skill development. I mean, I guess, do you see that those skills are already being part of the pipeline of development, or would you say actually, you need to figure out this yourself and try to learn a lot more AI?
That's a very good question. I mean, first, I think it's a really exciting time for anyone thinking of coming into the media industry to do so. There is so much change. AI will throw up so many more opportunities, will hopefully make easier some of the things that were difficult before and add a huge amount of extra, creative options.
Yeah.
In terms of what I would recommend, there seems to be a lot of things you can do simply by downloading some software, using websites that will let you try generative things out, download some code, play with things. You will be amazed at how quickly you can pick stuff up. Something that starts looking impossible at the start of the day, do a bit of playing, and you'll be amazed at what you can produce at the end. A lot of this isn't actually very hard. It's covered in lots of complicated terms, but actually, the fundamentals of, it's worth knowing the fundamentals of things like deep learning systems. They were devised 20 plus years ago. What's new is powerful GPUs, which are very good at solving inverting matrices and doing lots of clever maths, and massive data sets in the shape of the internet. It's those two things coming together that have given us the generative AI explosion. But a lot of the fundamentals aren't particularly new, and that are not necessarily as rocket sciencey as you might think. So just go out and try things. Look at videos on YouTube, play with stuff, see what you can do, get a broad picture of what's out there, and you'll find that it's maybe not quite as magic as it might seem once you start looking under the covers and get a feeling for it, what it can do. Although I'm sure parts of it are magic.
Yes.
Still don't understand how some of these video synthesis things manage to work so well.
What a gift if you want to learn programming, to have I'm not amazing at Python, for example, but I wanted to write an application that did something. And so ChatGPT is like my little personal assistant. It's like having a university lecturer. Like, why doesn't this work? It tells you, okay, well, I try that. Oh, that didn't quite work. Change that variable. It's amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. So it's all the things I wouldn't have normally done, like data analysis. Look at this spreadsheet. Give me a summary of this doc. So the time it would have taken to research those things, and programming. Writing a little Python program to automate a process bit that is wasting your time as an editor because you haven't endlessly dropped things into different files. And I think that's amazing. So yeah, open it up, ask it. Best way to kind of get started. It's amazing what you can do just in a bit of time. And I know people who have learnt to code through that process as well. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Rob mentioned, we are producing this session in association with the Media City Immersive Technologies Innovation Hub, which is a new innovation community in Greater Manchester. And we've just got a couple of minutes left, Pete. I'm curious if you could just explain a bit about the Dream Lab, which has been spawned out of this initiative. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so we're kind of here to incubate and accelerate new products, services, ideas. And artworks really that people want to do. So our program, we've been funding several innovations with companies like Rob's. There's a few more over there across the full gamut of immersive experiences, creative AI. We're doing work in kind of mental health and healthcare, training. We've got people building accessibility tools. We've got people looking at areas like using virtual production tooling to make production more sustainable. So lots of different areas, but very much sort of galvanized in these two central spaces of kind of games engines really, and kind of AI really. So Dream Lab's the community upstairs. Come and speak to me. Welcome to come and have a look round. So we've got loads of cool people who are doing amazing work at the intersection of some of these technologies, and that's people from lots of different backgrounds, from events production, from games, character artists, AI people, other people I don't even understand what they do. And we're trying to sort of create this community really of people who are interested in building a future, working together, learning from each other.
Fantastic. And Graham, I want to give you the opportunity to have the final word on this session. You've seen so much change over your career in terms of innovation, and I wonder whether you at this point in time feel more optimistic about the future of creative media, or whether you're more worried about it. Where do you sort of sit in your own optimism about the situation?
I think overall I would be very optimistic. I think we have a lot of interesting tooling. It's really going to democratize how people can come in. It's interesting to see how the media landscape is changing. I mean, I suspect you probably all know this. Do you know what the biggest competitor to standard TV is at the moment? It's YouTube.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that has changed and is changing, viewing everything from on small screens up to TV-based large screens, the democratization of that, and the shake-up that will produce for conventional broadcasters is going to be quite significant. But it's the new tooling, the creativity. Every innovation in technology has done something in terms of creative industries. You look at how things have been used, and even looking at the shortcomings of technology and how they suddenly become a creative element. Just the fact that you might think a camera should just capture a perfect view of the world, and oh gosh, the film isn't sensitive enough, we're going to have a larger aperture lens. Suddenly you find you can only focus a certain amount of your scene. Oh dear, all the rest is going to be blurred. Suddenly that becomes a creative tool for program makers to say, well, I want you to look at this bit, not that bit. So even where there's a shortcoming in a bit of technology, it opens all sorts of creative doors that people can use. And so I'm waiting to see all the creative things that people are going to do through small shortcomings in AI and generative AI. I'm sure there's a lot of fun to be had out there.
Yeah, I think we all join you in that sentiment. So thank you all for being here. Please join me in thanking Graham, Rob and Pete.
Cool.